You don't expect to run into your ex by accident at a wedding you weren't invited to. But somehow, my life's been full of things I didn't expect. It started on a Thursday morning when my mom called. I was editing photos in my apartment, halfway through a big batch for a real estate client. She asked if I'd be joining them for the weekend in La Jolla. I had no idea what she meant. She sounded surprised I didn't know. Said the whole family was going to Eli's wedding. My Eli. The guy I dated for 4 years. The guy who broke things off with a speech about different life paths. And the guy I'd only spoken to twice since. Apparently, the invitation had been sent to my parents' house. Not just to them, but addressed to me too. Mom assumed I was going and had already booked an Airbnb for everyone. My dad even rented a van. The way she put it, it was a done deal. No one asked if I wanted to go. They just lumped me in, like I was still the plus one. I told her I wasn't invited. She said, "Of course you are. Your name's on the envelope." And here's the thing. If you've ever tried to explain nuance to my mom, you know it's pointless. To her, the fact that Eli's fiancé had my name printed on a card meant it was fine. By Saturday afternoon, I was in the back of that van, wedged between my cousin Matt and a cooler full of sparkling water. I told myself I was just going to help with the photography, maybe grab a few candids of my family looking nice. I tried not to think about what it would mean to walk into a room where Eli and his bride were the center of attention. The venue was this cliffside spot overlooking the ocean. When we pulled up, the wind was sharp, carrying salt in the air. My family climbed out, all smiles and chatter. I lagged behind, camera in hand, trying to decide if I was making the biggest mistake of the year. Walking toward the entrance, I caught sight of the welcome sign. It was one of those hand-lettered boards framed in eucalyptus branches. "Welcome to the wedding of Eli Parker and Jessica Moreno." Seeing his full name printed like that felt strange, like it belonged to a version of him I didn't know anymore. The event staff greeted us, checked the list, and handed out little woven fans. No one questioned my presence. My family moved ahead, greeting distant relatives and in-laws I hadn't seen in years. I stuck close to the edge, watching the flow of people. I'd been to enough weddings to know there are certain kinds of guests. The ones who want to be seen, the ones who want to blend in, and the ones who don't know which they are until it's too late. That's the thing about social events with history baked in. They can feel less like celebrations and more like stages. Everyone plays a role. Some play it exactly the same as they did 10 years ago, even if they've changed in every other way. You've probably felt it too, that pull back into old dynamics the moment you're in the same room with certain people. I spotted Eli near the arbor, greeting guests in a tailored navy suit. He looked good, sharper, more polished than I remembered, but I noticed his jaw tighten when he saw my family approaching. I couldn't tell if he'd seen me yet. The ceremony hadn't started, and I debated whether to keep my distance or go up and say something. In theory, I was there as part of my family's group, but standing there, camera strap across my chest, I felt like an intruder with a front row ticket to a chapter one wasn't supposed to read. I lifted the camera and took a shot of the arbor, framing it against the ocean. The shutter click was loud in my ears, like I'd just confirmed I wasn't going anywhere. I drifted toward the seating area, sticking to the far side, where the view of the cliff gave me an excuse to keep my back to most people. Guests milled around, laughing in little clusters. The bridal party was off to one side, getting last-minute adjustments from a woman in a headset. Every so often I'd catch myself scanning the crowd for familiar faces, half hoping I wouldn't find any. That's when I saw Claire, Eli's sister. She was walking straight toward me, that same quick stride she'd had since high school track. We hadn't spoken in years, but the moment her eyes met mine, she broke into a smile like we'd just run into each other at the grocery store. "You made it," she said, pulling me into a hug before I could react. "I didn't think you'd come." Her tone was warm, but I noticed she didn't seem surprised, like my being here wasn't a mistake to her. I asked how she'd been, keeping it light. She launched into updates about her job, her kids, how the family was thrilled about Jessica. No awkward pauses, no mention of the breakup. It was almost disarming how easily she moved past it. That's the thing about some people. They decide on the version of you they want to remember, and they stick with it. You could go through the most dramatic changes, but to them, you'll always be the person from the last chapter they cared about. It's flattering in a way, and exhausting in another. As we talked, the music shifted, strings playing a slow, familiar tune. Guests began to take their seats. Claire gave my arm a quick squeeze, and hurried back toward her family's row. I stayed standing for a moment longer, scanning the aisle. Eli was there now, waiting at the altar. And when his eyes finally found mine, I knew without a doubt he hadn't expected me to come. The ceremony started, and I took a seat near the back, half hidden behind a row of taller guests. The sun was dropping lower, casting a warm glow over the ocean. Jessica walked down the aisle, looking radiant in that effortless way some people have, like the day had been designed around them. I watched Eli's expression as she approached. His smile was genuine, but every so often his gaze flicked past her, like he was checking something in the distance. I kept my camera in my lap, resisting the urge to start shooting. This wasn't my job, and I didn't want to be the person snapping away during vows. But it's funny, when you're used to seeing the world through a lens, you start framing moments even without lifting the camera. I noticed the subtle things, how Jessica's hands trembled when she adjusted her bouquet, how Eli's shoulders rose and fell on each breath. Weddings have this way of stripping things down to essentials. You see who's comfortable with emotion and who isn't. Some guests lean forward, fully present. Others glance around, scanning for the bar or the bathroom. And then there are people like me, half in the moment, half somewhere else entirely. They exchanged vows. The officiant pronounced them married, and everyone clapped. I joined in, but my hands felt heavy. It wasn't sadness, exactly. More like watching the ending of a story you used to be part of, rewritten without you. As people stood to follow the couple toward the reception area, I stayed put for a moment, letting the crowd thin. When I finally stood, I felt someone step up beside me. It was Eli. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he said quietly, his eyes scanning my face like he was trying to read a sentence he'd forgotten how to finish. "I didn't think so either," I said, keeping my voice even. For a second, neither of us moved. Guests streamed past us, heading toward the terrace where the cocktail hour had already begun. Eli shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. "My mom must have sent something to your family by mistake." He didn't sound upset, just tired, like the day had already been heavier than he'd expected. Mistake? The word landed strangely. If it had been anyone else, I might have believed it was just a mix-up, but I'd known Eli long enough to understand he didn't do much by accident. Whether he wanted me here or not, he'd had time to fix it. "I came with them," I said, nodding toward my parents in the distance, already chatting up someone near the bar. "Figured I'd just stay out of the way." He gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's never really been your style." And then he was gone, moving toward a cluster of groomsmen waiting for him. At the reception, I kept to the edges again, taking a few photos here and there when no one was paying attention. The music was upbeat, the drinks were flowing, and people were loosening up. That's when you really see who they are, when the formal part is over and the social rules start to blur. I caught snippets of conversation. Someone at my table was complaining about the parking. Another guest was explaining how they knew Jessica from a yoga retreat. My aunt was loudly telling a story about how she'd once mistaken soy sauce for coffee in the morning. And in the middle of it all, I kept noticing Eli glanced my way, not every minute, but enough to make me wonder if he was checking to see if I was still there, or if I'd finally decided to leave. Dinner was served, salmon or short rib, and I went with the salmon mostly to avoid making conversation with the server. My table was a mix of distant relatives and plus ones who were glued to their phones, perfect for blending in. I listened more than I talked, nodding at the right moments, smiling when someone made a joke I didn't quite hear. From where I sat, I had a clear view of the head table. Eli was laughing at something Jessica whispered, his hand resting lightly over hers. It looked natural, but every so often his attention drifted toward the crowd. That's when I realized he wasn't just scanning the room. He was looking for something, maybe someone. Weddings have a way of collapsing time. You see people you haven't thought about in years, and suddenly you're pulled back into old versions of yourself. I wondered what version Eli saw when his eyes landed on me. Was it the stubborn 25-year-old who wanted to travel the world with him, or the quiet 28-year-old who accepted the breakup without a fight? Midway through dinner, Claire reappeared at my side. "You have to come say hi to Mom," she said, already reaching for my arm. I resisted the urge to say no. Instead, I followed her to a table near the dance floor. Mrs. Parker looked the same, graceful, composed, the kind of woman who made you sit up straighter without meaning to. "It's so good to see you," she said, holding my hands like we'd spoken last week. She asked about my photography, my family, whether I'd been keeping busy. Not a single mention of why I might be there, or what it meant. That's when it hit me. Maybe no one here saw my presence as strange. Maybe I was the only one who felt like I had crashed something sacred. And that realization made it harder to ignore the question forming in my head. If no one else thought I didn't belong, was I the one keeping myself on the outside? After dinner, the lights dimmed and the DJ announced the first dance. Everyone gathered around the floor, phones in hand. I stayed toward the back, but I could still see them. Eli and Jessica moving slowly to some soft acoustic cover. The room was quiet except for the music and the occasional clink of glasses from the bar. You learn a lot watching how people dance together. Some couples lock eyes like they're the only ones in the room. Others smile for the audience, keeping it polished. Eli and Jessica were somewhere in between, comfortable, practiced, but not entirely private. Every few turns, he glanced outward, scanning faces. When the song ended, the crowd applauded, and the mood shifted. The DJ pulled people onto the floor for an upbeat number. My parents joined, and immediately my dad's tie already loosened. I caught myself smiling at the sight. It was impossible not to. I was checking my camera settings when a voice spoke beside me. "Still avoiding the dance floor?" It was Eli again, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one to me without asking if I wanted it. "Some things never change," I said, accepting it. He chuckled softly, but his expression didn't match the sound. "I wasn't sure you'd stay this long," I shrugged. "Guess I didn't have an exit plan." For a moment, we just stood there, watching our families mix under the string lights. And then he said, almost casually, "It's good you came, even if it's weird." That was the first time all night I felt the air shift, not because of what he said, but because of the way he looked at me when he said it, like we both knew there was more in that sentence, and neither of us was ready to touch it yet. The next song was loud enough to give us cover from small talk, so we just stood there, drinking in silence. Eli kept glancing toward the dance floor, but not in the restless way from earlier, more like he was watching for the right moment to disappear back into the crowd. "I should probably let you get back," I said finally, nodding toward Jessica, who was laughing with a group of friends near the DJ booth. "She's fine," he said. Then, after a pause, "I didn't know how I'd feel seeing you here. Turns out it's complicated." That was Eli, always measured, even when admitting something personal. I didn't push. Instead, I asked how he'd been since we last spoke. He gave the condensed version. New job, moved twice, picked up surfing. The kind of summary you'd give an old coworker, not someone who once knew the exact way you took your coffee. It's strange how you can share years with someone, and then the update fits in under a minute. Relationships don't just end, they shrink, get folded into a box labeled past, even if you never meant to store them away. We were interrupted by the DJ announcing the cake cutting. People started gathering near the dessert table, and Eli took a step back. "Glad you came," he said again, this time softer, before disappearing into the crowd. I stayed where I was, watching as they fed each other cake, laughter, applause, frosting on the tip of Jessica's nose. It was the kind of moment you're supposed to remember for years, and I wondered if he'd remember it the same way I would. From a few feet back, seeing 2 people smiling for everyone else, each in their own head. Somewhere between the cake and the bouquet toss, I realized my family was starting to wind down, which meant soon I'd have to decide whether to leave without saying anything else, or to give him a real goodbye. The bouquet toss came and went, followed by the garter toss, which I avoided entirely by stepping out to the terrace. The night air was cooler now, the sound of the ocean steady below. I leaned against the railing, letting the breeze cut through the noise from inside. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps behind me. Eli again. No champagne this time, just his hands shoved in his pockets. He stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth from his shoulder. "Needed a break?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. We stayed quiet for a while, watching the waves in the moonlight. It was easier to talk when we didn't have to look at each other. He asked about my photography, the places I traveled for work. I told him about a shoot in Montana, a stint in Chicago, small details, nothing heavy. Eventually he sighed. "You know, I didn't plan for you to get that invitation, but when I found out, I didn't try to fix it." That landed heavier than I expected. I didn't ask why. Maybe I didn't want the real answer. Some truths only matter if you plan to do something with them, and I wasn't sure I did. "You've got a good life," I said instead, nodding toward the reception. "I do," he replied, but his voice had a quiet edge to it. Not regret exactly, more like acknowledgement that good doesn't mean simple. When another gust of wind hit, he turned toward the door. I should get back in. He hesitated, like there was something else he wanted to add, but then he just gave a small nod and walked away. I stayed on the terrace, wondering if that was the last conversation we'd ever have, and whether I'd be okay if it was. By the time I went back inside, the crowd had thinned. A few diehards were still on the dance floor, and others lingered over coffee and desserts. My family was gathering near the exit, my mom waving me over with that impatient, "We're leaving now" gesture. I looked toward the head table one last time. Eli was there, leaning in to hear something Jessica was saying, both of them laughing. For a second, he glanced up and caught my eye. It wasn't a long look, but it was steady, acknowledging, almost like a silent thank you. Walking out of the venue, I realized I felt lighter than I had when I arrived. Not because anything had been resolved in some neat, cinematic way, but because I had seen for myself what I needed to see. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation or an apology. Sometimes it's just witnessing the other person in their new life and realizing yours has kept moving too. The van ride back was quiet. My parents were half asleep, my cousin scrolling through his phone. I stared out the window at the blur of lights along the coast, thinking about how the night had unfolded. I hadn't planned to be there, hadn't planned to speak to him, but maybe that was the point. The lack of control had forced me into a space I would have avoided, and maybe I'd needed that. Back at the Airbnb, I dumped my camera bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about the first time Eli and I met, about the years between then and now, and about how different the ending looked from the inside. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to picture what might have been. I was too busy thinking about what would be next.